Okay, in this video we're going to talk about autoscaling groups and autoscaling and elastic load balancing and mainly how to set it up and what the purpose is. So let's just start with autoscaling. So the main purpose of autoscaling is to um, give your infrastructure the ability to scale up or scale down as the need arises. If you, let's say, have a whole bunch of new users that have started using your app, you want to be able to create more EC2 instances automatically. And then let's say fewer people were using your application, then you want to be able to scale down automatically. So as the need arises based on different criteria that you set, you can increase or decrease the number of EC2 instances automatically. Okay, so we're going to create an auto-scaling group in this video that's linked with a load balancer. I already made a video about how to set up a load balancer, so I'm gonna still set it up here as well, but there is a separate video just for how to set up a load balancer. So I'm gonna just show the whole thing of what we're gonna do because there's gonna be a lot of steps here. So here are all the steps. We're going to do some preparation and create a target group for the load balancer. Then we're going to create a security group for the load balancer. We're going to create the load balancer using that target group and security group. Then we're going to create a security group for the EC2. We're going to then create a launch template that's going to be used for the autoscaling group. And then we're finally going to create the autoscaling group, and all the details are here. And then we're going to configure actually this part won't be necessary because we'll already set that up. So the instances, the EC2 instances in the autoscaling group will only be able to accept connections from the load balancer. You won't be able to access them directly. Then we're going to scale out our load balancer to 4 just to show how that happens. So it's going to automatically increase to 4. Then we're going to scale down to 1 and show how the scaling in process works. And then we're finally going to just clean up the whole thing, delete everything, and go back to where we started. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So the first thing on our list is to create the target group for the load balancer. So I'm going to go into the load balancer here, target groups. And I'm going to create a target group. I'm going to call it test, let's call it web server for the autoscaling group. And it's going to be open on port 80. It's going to use the default VPC. And again, the health checks we can configure, but we can just leave them the default as it is. So there's our target group. Oh, and one more thing I'm going to add here is we're going to update this part right here, the deregistration delay. So right now it's set at 5 minutes, but we're going to make that a lot less because it's going to really slow down the demo when I show you how we're going to scale up and scale down. So we're going to edit attributes. Instead of 300 seconds, we're going to just set it to 3 seconds. Okay, so that's a lot better. So now we have our target group. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to create the security group for the target group. So let's do that. Let's call this test for the ELB web server. Okay, we're going to just say just open port HTTP and just make that available for everybody. And that's all we really need for the load balancer. I'm going to just copy the name to there. And now if we take a look, okay, so the inbound rules. So now anybody in the world will be able to access the load balancer, which is what we want. We could also add port 443 for SSL as here as well, but just for the purposes of our demo, we're just going to be accessing it over port 80, so we can just leave it like this. Then we are going to create the load balancer that's going to use this security group. So let's do that. So we can do that here. And we're going to create an HTTP load balancer. And then let's just call it test. Just going to say that it's used with the autoscaling group for web server as a web server. It's going to be internet facing. As you can see here, it's going to just use HTTP, and then we're going to make all the availability zones part of this load balancer, just like that. We could add tags, but we're not going to right now. And okay, as far as security groups, so we just created that security group, and we're going to use it right here. Then we're going to configure the routing. Okay, so here is, this is where we already created our target group. So it should show up here. There it is. So we're just going to use that target group, and that's it. We can also customize some of the health checks, but we'll just leave this for now. The next step is to register targets. So we don't have any targets, and that's okay. We could just create a load balancer with no targets for now, because we're going to create the targets as part of our autoscaling group. Say review and create. So it's going to take a couple of minutes to create this, the load balancer. Here it's just provisioning. So that's fine. We can just let it do that, and we're going to move on. So what we're going to do now is we're going to create the security group for our EC2 instances. So the autoscaling group will automatically create EC2s, and those EC2s need to use a specific security group. So we're going to create that security group right now. So we're going to say test EC2 of the autoscaling group. And what we're going to do here is we're going to say that it's only going to allow from port 80, so let's say HTTP, but instead of saying from anywhere, we're going to say only from the load balancer. So if we say SG, and then we could see that load balancer, so that's automatically only allowing requests to come in from the load balancer, nowhere else, which is good, which is what we want. We don't want these EC2 instances to be available to access to anybody. So let's do that. And I'm just going to copy the name here to here. Okay, just like that. Okay, now it's showing it's only open on port 80 to the security group, which is the ELB security group. Okay, and so we're done with that. The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a launch template. So the launch template, this is something right here. This is allowing you to automatically create EC2s based off of a template, so you don't have to keep manually entering all the parameters each time. So we're going to do that here. There's just something else that I want to bring up, which is launch configuration. So under here, under autoscaling, there's another thing called launch configurations, which is very similar. So you can just create it, the same thing, a configuration for how you create EC2s. But this is, it looks like this is sort of going to be deprecated soon, and AWS looks like it's encouraging you to use launch templates, because launch templates have more features, like you can have different versions of them, and then you can update them, so they're more flexible than the launch configurations. So for our demo here, I'm just going to use the launch templates because it's sort of the new way of doing things anyway. So I'm going to create a new one. Let's call it test ASG, and then say web server. And then the AMI, I'm just going to have it use the Linux 2 AMI. The instant type, I'm going to say T2 micro. The key pair is, there's a key pair that I already created, so you'd have to create your own key pair in order to access the instances. And then the network settings, we're going to leave it as VPC. And then this is the part I was talking about before. So we got to give it a security, we don't have to, but we should give it a security group for the template, and it's going to need one anyway when you're creating an EC2. So let's use the one that we just created, which is this one right here. The storage volumes we could leave the same. So this is actually, this is a cool part because you can, every EC2 instance created from this launch template will have a name, and this will actually be good. So let's give it test, and we'll just say ASG. So now we know that any EC2 instance with that name was created from this launch template as part of the autoscaling group. Okay, the network interfaces we can leave, and then the user data. So this is actually important because on the advanced details we can put in the user data, which is all the way at the bottom here. So every time that the EC2 instance is going to get launched, it's going to run this script, which is right here. And this is going to install the Apache web server, and it's also going to create a unique web page that's going to say hello world from, and then it'll be the unique host name of that EC2 instance, which will have the internal IP address. This will be very useful for us because we'll be able to see exactly which EC2 instance is servicing each request. So when we have our load balancer and we have our autoscaling group, we'll be able to quickly test to see that everything is working properly. So I'm going to copy that, paste that into here, and I think everything else looks good. Okay, and just create this launch template. Okay, so it's given me the option to launch the instance from this. So I can launch an instance from this template. I can also create an autoscaling group from this template, and I can create a fleet of spot instances from this launch template as well. So they're pretty flexible. That's why they're kind of, AWS is encouraging you to use these instead of the launch configurations, because the launch configurations were only for autoscaling groups. So I'm just going to click on that so I can see it. So there's my launch template, and then what we can do now is if we go down to the autoscaling group, which is right here, so now we're finally ready to create our autoscaling group. So we're going to create this group, and we're going to do it, so again, that you can do it from a launch configuration or a launch template. Like I was saying, this is sort of the newer and better way, so that's why we're going to say launch template. And there's the one that we just created. So let's select that one, and then we're going to click next. We're going to give this a name, so let's call it test web server. Okay. So here we can kind of say, okay, follow the launch template. We can even customize it so that way there's different instance types that you can create and everything like that. I'm just going to leave it as just do what the template says. And then here it says start with one instance. We could actually start with more. Let's say we start with 2 instances, and then this is the default VPC, and the subnet, this is important, so we're going to select all the subnets that were available for our default VPC, because again, our load balancer is also using all the subnets, so it's important that this matches with the load balancer. So now we have all 6 subnets. The advanced details, I think, yeah, this part here, the grace period, this is just how long to wait before checking for the health of each instance. It doesn't have to be 300 seconds. It could just be like, it could even be like 60 seconds. Okay, and then let's configure the scaling policies. Okay, so this is the actual part where you can automate scaling up and scaling down. So by default, it's not going to do that. It's just going to keep everything in one. Just keep everything in, let's say we said 2 instances, and it'll just keep everything in 2 instances. So if one becomes unhealthy and goes down, it'll bring up another one automatically, so it'll always maintain 2 instances. But you can actually say, you know what, you can actually scale up or down, so we'll say between 1 and 5, And let's say you do that scaling up and down based on the CPU utilization. And let's say the target value, let's say you want it to be 50. So if the CPU utilization ever goes above 50, that's when it's going to scale up. There's other parameters you can use here. There's even very custom alarms that you could set up based like on how to scale up or scale down, but we can just leave it this for now. And then let's just say instances need 60 seconds to warm up after scaling. And let's go to, okay, for the notifications, we don't need notifications for now. The tags, this isn't for the EC2 instances, this is for the auto-scaling groups. We don't need the tags for that. So we can review this, and let's create it. Okay. So now, the cool part now is that it's going to automatically create those EC2 instances. So right now, we said we want 2, and there's a min of 1 and max of 5. So if we bring this up, we're going to see, so right here, so it's launching, you know what I did? I didn't actually add these to the load balancer. So I'm actually going to create a new one that's going to add this to the load balancer. So that way, otherwise right now, because the scaling is working, but they're not part of the load balancer. So let me add this here. So I'm going to add that. That's the launch template. I'm going to just run through this again. So let's say test2 ELB web server, and let's start with 2. We're going to select all the subnets. And let's see, where's the, okay, here's our policy between 1 and 5. And let's say 50% and 60 seconds. No notification. Okay. Oh, here it is. This is what I missed. Receive traffic from one or more load balancers. So this is the part. So here is where we say, okay, you know what? Link this auto-scaling group with the load balancer, and it's going to be, it's not a classic one. It's sort of the newer one, and that has a target group which we already created. There's our target group, and let the health check be based on the ELB. So let the ELB do the health check because the ELB already has health checks built in. And the grace period, that could be 60 seconds. And there we go. So now this auto-scaling group is linked to the load balancer. So we're just gonna configure this. We already got this set up. So it's gonna check for CPU utilization between, to make sure that it's below 50%. And the notifications and the tags we can leave as is. Let's review. So it's going to create initially two instances, and those will be automatically added to the target group in the load balancer. So let's do that. So now, okay, so this is the one that we just created, and then this is the one that doesn't have that doesn't have a link to the load balancer. But as you can see, it brought up the two instances. If we go up to the instances, so right here, you see how they're all named test ASG because they're using that launch template. But these are the two that were brought up. They're not part of the load balancer. And the other two, these two are being brought up right now. So what we can do is we can delete the original ASG, and what that's going to do, like this one right here, and that's going to delete the EC2 instances automatically, just like that. And then this one is still being it's still provisioning the EC2. So there you go. So there's one has been provisioned. The second one is in the process of being provisioned. What we're going to do is we're going to check that it's going to be added to the target group of the load balancer. So if we go into the target group, there is our this is our target group, and then the targets in here. Okay, cool. You see how it already has one EC2 instance, this guy right here, which is, he's running. Okay, that's 03D. If we look at all the instances, so there's 03D. Now this guy right here, 032A, he is now running as well, and it should be added to that target group. So if we go back to the target group, we should see, there it is. Now we see two instances, and you can see here target registration is in progress. So now the autoscaling group automatically created two instances and automatically added them to the load balancer's target group. Okay, so now that we have that, let's try and access the let's try to access these EC2 instances like from the web. So if we go back to the instances, they're here. Now, what we were saying before is they should not be accessible through that, through that public IP. If we try and do that, see it keeps spinning, so it's not accessible through that. And let's try the other one, because we set up our security group to only allow access from the load balancer there. So it's not allowing us to do that, which is what we want. And now let's access the load balancer, and we can do that here. And we use that, the DNS name, which is there. So now, there it is. So then this is one of the EC2 instances, 172.31.81.115. If we go back to our list of instances, we could see it's not that one. It's this one right here, 172.31.81.115, which matches that one. And then if we try it again, it should give us the other one. There it is. 60, so 172.31.62.236. And if we go to that one, there it is, 172.31.62.236. And if we keep accessing the load balancer, should just keep cycling one to the other. So there's one, there's the other, there's one, there's the other. So again, now we know, okay, the autoscaling group is working. It added it to the load balancer automatically. Now let's try scaling up. So we said the autoscaling group can support anywhere from 1 to 5 instances, and right now we have 2. So let's change it. Let's pretend there was an issue with the CPU. Let's say there was a huge load of users, and now we want to scale that up. So let's go to autoscaling group, and there it is. And what we want to do is we want to edit it. So this is the part. The desired capacity is 2, the minimum is 1, max is 5. We're going to change the desired capacity to 4, and then I want to show you what happens right now. All we have to do is do that, and then automatically the ASG will now create 2 new instances, and it will automatically register them with the load balancer, and then we should automatically now have 4 instances running in this autoscaling group. So we just said we want 4, but right now we have 2. So let's see. Okay, you got to give it a second. There it is. So it's showing you that it started 2 more instances right there. Now, if we go to our instance dashboard, we should see these 2 instances. There they are. So these 2 instances are coming up. They're pending. And then what's going to happen is they should get added to the target group of the load balancer. Now the target group, okay, here it is. It actually already added them, but the registration is in progress. So they're not, we can test it to see if they're actually serving requests, but those 2 instances have been added to the target group automatically. So now the load balancer will have 4 EC2s to send requests to. So if we look at our instances again, we're going to see still initializing those two instances. So let's try hitting our load balancer again, and let's see if it can give us 4 different messages now instead of only 2. So let's try this. So let's do, we have 3162.236, 73.102. There it is, 22.12, and 81.115. So these are the new guys. So let's go here. So there's 62.236. There's 81.115. That matches up this one right here. 172.31, 81.115. 172.31, 81.115. So that's the new EC2 that was just brought up. So now, if we hit our load balancer, it's going to keep cycling through the 4 instances that we now have as part of this autoscaling group. Okay, and you see all we had to do was just change our desired count. So now let's do the opposite. Let's scale down to just 1. So what we'll do is we'll go into our autoscaling groups and we'll update this to now the desired capacity to just be 1. Save. Okay, so now what it should do is it should automatically terminate 3 out of those 4 EC2 instances. Okay, and here it is. So what it's going to do first is it's going to deregister them from the target group of the load balancer. After they've been deregistered, it will then terminate those instances. And this is what I was talking about at the very beginning when I was setting up the target group, because I was saying the default deregistration delay is like 300 seconds. So I changed it to only 3 seconds. So now we don't have to wait so long for these EC2 instances to be deregistered from the target group. So let's check that. If we go to the target group, which is right here. So let's look at the targets. There it is. 3 have been removed, only 1 remains, which is what we want. And now the 3 should be now in the process of being terminated. If we go to the instance, so there it is. So then they've already been terminated. So we only have 1 running now. So now if we go to our, if we hit our load balancer, we should only see 1 request, which is 172.31.73.102. If I keep hitting it, it's still just that single EC2 instance. And then if we check the IP of the one that's still running, there it is, 172.31.73.102, which matches that. Great, so now we've created the auto-scaling group, we've scaled it up, we've scaled it down. Now, that's pretty much it. What I'm going to do, though, is I'm going to clean up the whole thing, so we're back to where we originally started. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete the autoscaling group. And what that's going to do is it'll automatically delete all the EC2 instances associated with that autoscaling group. So I'm here, I'm going to just say delete. It will do that. So it will deregister the EC2 instance from the target group. It will then terminate it. So if we look at the target group, it should have now 0 targets. And it does. So there's 0 targets. And then if we look at the EC2 instances, you see how it's shutting down. So now it's in the process of getting terminated. So we'll just let it shut down and terminate. And then if we try to access now our load balancer, it's got no targets, so it's just going to hang. Yeah, it's saying service temporarily unavailable. So now we know that there are no instances to service that request. Then what we'll do is we'll delete the launch template. So that's right over here. So we can delete that. Delete template. We have to say delete there. Then we'll delete the load balancer, which is here. Say delete. Then we'll delete the target group that was associated with that load balancer, which is here. There. Then we're going to delete the security group that was used by the EC2. So that's this one right here, which was referencing the ELB security group. So we have to delete this one first, because if we try to delete this one, it's going to say we can't because it's being referenced by another security group right here. Right? So it's not going to allow us to delete it. So we have to delete the EC2 security group first. And then finally we delete the ELB security group. And that's it. And now we are back to where we started for the autoscaling groups.